Is it okay for a man over 50 like me to still want these things? Her voice asking me to try just one more time shook my self-control. My name is Daniel. As a single father, I raised my son, who is now 25, and before I knew it, I turned 55. It's been 10 years since my wife, Michelle, passed away. The memories of those days are still vivid in my mind. Michelle complained about feeling bloated, and although I thought it was nothing serious, I encouraged her to visit the hospital. However, the diagnosis was pancreatic cancer with only 1 month to live. I couldn't believe it. After all, my wife looked healthy right before me. Michelle and our son, Andrew, panicked about the sudden news. That's when I decided to take some time off from work. I'm a carpenter. I plunged into this world right after graduating from high school. At the time, I was working on building a new house, commissioned by an architect I was close with. When I explained the situation, both the architect and the client readily agreed to delay the construction period. For the month until Michelle passed away, I devoted myself to caring for her at home, fully supporting Andrew as well. I made sure to live those days without any regrets. It was the most intense month of my life. After she passed away and I was organizing her belongings, I found a drawer filled with numerous letters. There were letters prepared for Andrew to receive each year until he turned 20, titled Dear Andrew, Dear 16-year-old Andrew, Dear 17-year-old Andrew, and even one for when he gets married, titled Dear Andrew on his wedding day. And I found a letter addressed to me as well. I carefully opened the envelope and read it. The list included age-specific gifts she wanted to give Andrew for his birthdays, his favorite recipes, and mine. It even detailed instructions on how to perform various household tasks. How had she written so much without me noticing? After receiving her terminal diagnosis, she was energetic for about a week, but then quickly deteriorated. Perhaps the weak pen pressure in some places was from when she wasn't feeling well. Imagining Michelle writing these letters in pain brought tears to my eyes. And on the last page, it was written, Dear Daniel, after I settle in heaven, fall in love again, nurture love with someone else, I look forward to discussing your wonderful qualities with that person in heaven. I cried. It had been a while since the funeral, but I had never cried until then. I felt it was unmanly, and somehow, tears just wouldn't come. But upon reading this letter, I cried. It was probably the most I had ever cried in my life. I couldn't imagine feeling up for romance at all. That letter felt like a final farewell, and I kept it hidden deep in the drawer. Even when I opened the drawer to check what to give Andrew for his birthday, I made sure not to look at that last letter. It's been 10 years since then. Even now, at 55, I don't feel like getting into a relationship. Andrew, now 25, still lives at home. I've suggested countless times that he should consider living on his own, but, Dad, I'm getting married, he suddenly announced one day. Despite all my urging for him to move out, the thought of him actually leaving felt lonely. Whether he knew how melancholic I felt or not, he cheerfully shared his news. She's a bit older than me, but she's beautiful. It was love at first sight at a mixer, and I really pursued her. When can I bring her over? He seemed a bit shy yet visibly happy. I could tell he had found a good partner as the corners of my eyes crinkled with a smile. My work schedule is flexible, so I can make time whenever needed. When I told him to let me know a convenient day, he quickly left. He mentioned he was going on a date. Is today okay? He asked, but I advised against it since neither I nor his partner were probably ready, and sent him off on his date. Really, he has grown into a man who lacks consideration. But I raised him, so maybe it can't be helped. Speaking of which, I remembered there was a gift Michelle wanted to give him for his wedding, and for the first time in a long while, I rummaged through the drawer. I hadn't opened the drawer for 5 years since the letters were meant to be given to him only until he turned 20. As I was searching through the drawer, a piece of paper fluttered down. A glimpse of Dear Daniel caught my eye. It was the last page of that letter. The letter that was supposed to be at the bottom of the drawer had fallen out. It was as if it was insisting on something. What could it be? Laughing off the sudden thought, I put the letter back deep in the drawer. 1 week after Andrew announced his engagement, he brought his fiancée to meet me. I am Jessica. Nice to meet you. The woman who looked me straight in the eye was 28, 3 years older than Andrew. It seems you were nervous too, Daniel. Taken aback by her comment, I was momentarily confused. Turning to Andrew, I noticed he was frowning. Dad, your shirt is inside out. Ah, shoot. As I scrambled, Jessica burst out laughing. That's it, I can't handle it. I love how funny you are, Daniel. Her saying I love you caught me off guard. This girl, she reminds me of someone. Especially her smiling face looks like someone. But who was it? Lately, these things don't come to mind easily. I don't know much about recent pop stars or actresses, but she must look like some celebrity. Deciding to blame it on my age, I stopped trying to figure out who Jessica resembled. She seems like a fine young lady, I thought as I watched Jessica and Andrew leave through the front door. I spoke to Michelle's photo. Michelle, don't you think Andrew has caught a fine woman? She was very classy. We're going to meet her parents soon. I'll make sure not to wear my shirt inside out then. They say we're going to eat French food. Remember, we went just once. The napkins and all those knives were quite a hassle. Her mother is a single mom too. It's good. It would have been hard to face both of them alone. I talked aimlessly and then stood up. It felt like Michelle was smiling a little. On the day of the meal, I checked my shirt carefully and headed to the restaurant in my suit. Andrew was also in a suit, and Jessica wore a beautiful dress. Jessica, who had been checking her mobile phone, turned to me with an apologetic look. I'm sorry, my mother will be a little late due to work. She wants us to go in first, she said. So, we decided to enter the restaurant. The table was set beautifully with a cream-colored tablecloth, dishes, cutlery, and napkins all neatly arranged. Just seeing this made me a bit nervous. Uncharacteristically, I had studied up on the internet. The napkin, I remembered, goes like this on my lap. As I was about to pick up the napkin, a small shriek from Jessica made me jump. Hey, what are you doing? Looking up, I saw Andrew picking up the finger bowl, about to drink the water. Hot what? He didn't even understand what he was being scolded for. It seems I should have made Andrew brush up on his manners. That's not drinking water. Look, this is how you wash your fingers. Watching her instruct briskly, I was suddenly reminded of my high school days. I was often scolded like that too. By a girl who was the class rep and my first girlfriend. Back then, I was planning to go straight into carpentry instead of pursuing further education, so I was quite the troublemaker. I fell for a girl who wasn't afraid to scold me whenever I acted up. Initially, she was my nemesis, but somehow we ended up dating. Oh right, she confessed to me. She said she couldn't just leave me be. I never expected a class rep to fall for me, so it was quite a surprise and a delight. Come to think of it, Jessica's way of scolding. It's a bit like how she used to scold. Now that I think about it, even her face. Wait, what was her name? As I pondered this, a woman appeared, saying, "Sorry I'm late." The face I had just been remembering, now slightly marked by wrinkles. She seemed like a doppelganger of the woman in my mind, and I couldn't help but exclaim. Could it be? Then, I recalled the class rep's name and said it out loud. Nicole. The woman widened her eyes and looked at me intently. Apparently, she didn't remember right away. It's me, Daniel, remember, from high school. As I began to explain, realization dawned on her face. What, Daniel, no way, She seemed hesitant to continue, so I took over. I've grown a bit, haven't I? Laughing heartily, Nicole blushed. Sorry, you've, well, not so much gotten fat as become more robust. She didn't forget to put a positive spin on it. That's right. She was always like that. You two know each other. We had left the main subjects of the meeting, our children, behind. As I pondered how to explain, Nicole boldly declared, we were classmates in high school. Actually, we dated back then. The children were visibly shocked by her revelation. I hadn't expected her to disclose that we dated, and it flustered me a bit. As if anticipating my disarray, Nicole blurted out, there's no point hiding it. Isn't it a miracle? Our children, who we dated in high school, are getting married to each other. She seemed a bit excited. Understandably so. I was excited too. Actually, I was still feeling quite surreal. What are the odds? The conversation flowed freely from then on, and time flew by quickly, and before we knew it, we had finished dessert. Initially, the focus was on the children. I described Andrew as a bit of a show-off, a troublemaker like me, and so carefree that he wouldn't even bother to prepare for occasions like this. Nicole, while being glared at by Jessica, happily talked about how Jessica was so serious and responsible that she never thought she would get married, but was delighted that she could marry such a wonderful person. Then the conversation turned to us. Nicole knew my wife had passed away, as she had heard it from Jessica. She consoled me, acknowledging how difficult it must have been to lose my wife during Andrew's sensitive teenage years, and how hard it surely was. Nicole mentioned that she had divorced her husband due to personality differences when Jessica was in elementary school. Her ex-husband quickly remarried, but she had been too busy raising Jessica alone to think about her own relationships, remaining single since then. As we were deep in conversation, I noticed the kids watching us. They seemed to be smirking a bit. They look good together, don't they? Andrew commented, looking at Jessica. To which Jessica jokingly replied, why don't they just date then? Don't tease us. I glared at them, but Nicole just looked relaxed. Oh, come on, it's fine, you've become so rigid, she teased. It felt like the roles of the class rep and the mischievous boy had reversed. Despite being a single mother, Nicole had aged gracefully. After chatting for a while longer, we parted ways. I had put on weight, but she hadn't changed much. She usually wears suits for work, and they really look sharp on her. While thinking about this, Andrew and I were walking home. He teased again, didn't it seem like there was a good vibe? At my age, what good vibe could there possibly be? I retorted sharply. But he continued teasing, hey, could something happen between you two? Furthermore, he added, why did you guys break up? It seemed fine. Oh, if you had stayed together, would I not have been born? I decided to ignore that comment. Why did we break up? That's right. Nicole went to college, and I pursued carpentry. We ended up in a long-distance relationship, and our lifestyles were so different that we mutually agreed to part ways. We had been together for just over a year, starting when we were seniors in high school. As I pondered this, he cheerfully mentioned, we'll be seeing each other a lot during the wedding preparations, so good luck. Should parents even be this involved in wedding planning? In my time, it was mostly just the couple doing the preparations, but times might have changed. I didn't mind meeting her, though. Indeed, we ended up seeing each other frequently at the planning meetings. Whether or not dresses and tuxedos suited them was one thing, but choosing the color and type of paper for the invitations seemed trivial to me. However, Nicole, holding an invitation envelope, excitedly remarked, "Oh, this green is lovely. This one's cute too, but pink might be too much for Andrew, don't you think? What do you think, Daniel?" Caught in the spotlight, I pointed to the pink envelopes she favored. "Wow, Dad, that's your taste," he exclaimed. "Such matters should be left to the preferences of women." I'd have to give him a proper talk about that later. "You probably reacted the same way when you were young, didn't you, Danielle?" she said playfully, giving me an upward glance. "I wonder if it's a testament to your wife's education." Thoughtfully, Nicole says. It seems Nicole had easily figured out that I was accommodating her preferences. Being so involved in the wedding venue felt somewhat uncomfortable. Though Andrew insisted, and I reluctantly accompanied him, these minor exchanges were somewhat enjoyable. Once we get married, should all four of us live together? It sounds like it could be fun. After the color of the invitations was decided and the planner left, leaving just the four of us, Jessica dropped this bombshell. I blushed deeply and denied it outright. Nicole was laughing. Could it be that she wasn't entirely opposed to the idea? If we could laugh together like this, maybe remarriage wasn't such a bad idea. But surely, it was unthinkable for the parents of the children getting married to each other to also marry. Nicole may have aged beautifully, but I had become more robust due to my job, complete with a beer belly. I found myself daydreaming about a life with Nicole, only to dismiss the thought almost immediately. Though it was a bit exhausting, the thrill of our enjoyable conversation lingered as Andrew and I returned home. The house felt unusually cold and bleak. Perhaps it was a backlash from the happy feelings I had just experienced. One photo frame in the living room caught my eye. I realized I hadn't spoken to Michelle in a while. I stared blankly at her photo. The dust-covered frame felt like a blow to my head, proof of my recent neglect. I picked up her photo and wiped off the dust. "Sorry about this, letting so much dust gather," I spoke softly. Of course, there was no reply from her. What was I getting so carried away about? Thinking about romance at this point, I'd be doing you wrong, wouldn't I? I muttered again. There was a noise from behind. I wondered if Andrew had overheard my disheartened voice. After that, I started making excuses to avoid going to the planning meetings I was invited to. Although work was a bit busier, I simply didn't feel like attending. Nicole, with whom I had exchanged contact details, occasionally sent me messages to check in with the results of the planning meetings. However, I ignored those messages too. A grown man indulging in romance seemed undignified. Yes, I feared that if I kept meeting Nicole, I wouldn't be able to stop my feelings. I didn't deserve to face Michelle. To dispel my feelings for Nicole, I polished the photo frame until it sparkled. Then, a few months later, the day of Andrew and Jessica's wedding arrived. Since I hadn't replied to Nicole's messages, it felt awkward to face her, so I just exchanged brief greetings and then paced restlessly in the lobby, striking up idle conversations with relatives on the groom's side. As the reception began, things got busy. I toasted with guests and made small talk. Nicole was doing the same. Somehow, I felt relieved that there was some distance between us. Because Nicole looked breathtakingly beautiful in her finery. Standing next to her, it felt like my heart might just jump out. The reception proceeded smoothly, and as the atmosphere settled, a spotlight suddenly shone on me. Andrew and Jessica, the bride and groom, looked at me with surprised expressions. I had arranged a surprise with the planner. Thank you all for being here today. Now, I would like to read a letter from my wife in heaven, addressed to Andrew and Jessica. As I spoke into the microphone, he stared at me wide-eyed. Dear Andrew, congratulations on your wedding. Dear the bride, Jessica, thank you for marrying Andrew. I filled in the blank where it was written to the bride, and read it aloud. This was the last letter Michelle had written before she passed away. "Have you learned to eat eggplants you used to hate?" I read, and laughter spilled from Andrew's friends. He still hates eggplants. I continued reading the letter impassively to avoid getting choked up with tears. Soft sobbing could be heard around the venue. "This reception. I am watching from the sky. I am so happy to see you looking incredibly joyful. May you both be happy forever. Take good care of Jessica." With that, I folded the letter, concluding the emotional moment. I was fidgety partly because of this. Until I finished reading Michelle's letter, I felt barely alive. After completing this important task, I let out a huge sigh of relief. Andrew was teary-eyed but looked at me and grinned mischievously. What was that sly smile about? As I started to feel less tense and more aware of my surroundings, I noticed that the spotlight had shifted to Andrew. He then took the microphone in his hand. What was he planning to do with the microphone? As I wondered, he also took a letter. Familiar pink stationery. It was the same kind of paper I was holding in my hand. Could it be? "From mother to father, I have a letter to read on her behalf," he announced, sending a shock through me. As I stood there dazed, his lips curled into a mischievous grin. "Actually, there are 2 letters, one for if father had remarried, and one for if he hadn't. Since he hasn't remarried, I'll read this one," he said, and the room erupted in laughter. My brain was still trying to catch up. "Dear Daniel, so you still haven't remarried?" His dramatic shout prompted more laughter from the crowd. "You were told to fall in love, but you're still the serious Daniel, aren't you? But see, Andrew is getting married and looks happy, right? I want you to find happiness too. Since Andrew is starting his own family, you should too, Daniel, and..." There was a pause before the next words. "I look forward to the day in heaven when I can talk about your wonderful qualities with your new partner." Indeed, those were the words. The last words I had tucked away deep in a drawer. I bawled my eyes out. Unbecoming of my age, in front of many eyes, I couldn't stop sobbing. While the MC cleverly filled up the gap with an ad-lib, I managed to compose myself, holding a handkerchief in one hand. Influenced by my sobs, Andrew and Jessica, tears in their eyes, took the microphone. And both began speaking simultaneously. Mom, Dad. Nicole and I exchanged surprised glances. "We've decided to read a letter from both of us to both our parents." Andrew and Jessica began speaking in turns. "I was quite the troublemaker," he confessed. His words sent a wave of laughter through the crowd. "And I was the typical class rep," she added. This time, laughter enveloped the bride's side of the room. "Dad was a troublemaker too." The spotlight turned to me. I had a bad feeling about where this was heading. Mom was also a class rep. Nicole's eyes widened in surprise. "I am forever grateful to my dad, who raised me alone. I am forever grateful to my mom, who raised me alone." Their words synchronized perfectly. "And now, I will be happy with Jessica. I, too, will be happy with Andrew." And so, the two said together, "Please make sure Dad and Mom are also happy." I can tell that Nicole is shivering next to me. When I try to look at Nicole, Andrew suddenly shouts, "Dad." Startled, I look straight at Andrew again. Talking with Mom in heaven, that must be Nicole's job. Hearing him shout that, I panic. "Don't say such reckless things. You're making Nicole uncomfortable." As I say that, Jessica grabs the microphone. "Mom, it's not so bad, right?" Hearing her words, I finally look at Nicole, who has her face covered with her hands, blushing to her ears. Then, Nicole's lips move. "It's not something I should say in front of everyone." Nicole whispers to me in a voice so low that only I can hear. I know you care deeply for Michelle." Those words stir my heart. And they make me hopeful. Should I, a man over 50, still hope for such things? But shall we try it just one more time? Her whispered continuation shakes my self-control. Andrew and Jessica seem to hear it, as they are both smiling broadly. Trying not to look at their faces, I speak to Nicole. "But it's not fair to Michelle or you." Barely squeezing out the words, Nicole chuckles. "Silly. I'll probably get along famously with Michelle in heaven. After all, we have the same taste in men." Knocked out by her words. Thinking about our children marrying and dismarrying too, it's bizarre. Concerned about looking foolish in front of relatives, friends of our children, I let go of all such worries and embrace Nicole. I remember the first time I held her during high school. It was after she confessed her feelings to me. Just like that time, I make the same promise as I did in high school, to cherish her delicate and slender form. I will always be there for you. This time for sure. I add those words to my old vow. Years later, I'm pacing between the living room and the front door. Seeing me, Nicole sighs at Michelle's picture, exasperated. "Can you see him? He can't settle down." She speaks to Michelle. "You've met Annie at the hospital, right? What's got you so fidgety?" Challenge, I retort. It's her first time coming to this house. Annie is our granddaughter. Nicole dismisses my argument with the okay, and sits down by the window. She gestures for me to come over. I obediently follow. Sitting and looking out at the garden, I see a small tree reaching up to the sky. Nicole and I planted it when we remarried. Given our age, we don't have much time left. Feeling faint-hearted, I mentioned this to Nicole, who bought a sapling. "Let's live long enough to see this tree grow taller than the house, and then have a nice chat with Michelle." Her smile as she said this is dazzling, and I'm reminded of it every time I see this tree. It seems like it will take a while for that tree to reach the roof. Hearing that, Nicole says, "Let's make lots of memories in that time." Nicole rests her small head on my shoulder. I wrap my arm around her shoulders. I love this peaceful moment by the window. It feels like Michelle is laughing behind us. Just then, I hear the sound of a car engine. Oh, looks like they are here. It's probably Andrew and Jessica's car. They've come to visit, bringing our first grandchild. We need to greet them. Nicole and I exchange glances, stand up, and walk towards the entrance.